Master JavaScript for loops with this code challenge. This code challenge is split into 3 parts, so you can attempt each part yourself before watching the solution in this video. This code challenge is built for beginners who are just starting to learn for loops. The first part is called message mixer. You should ask a user to write a message using the prompt function. I will quickly demonstrate how prompt function works. At first, you should connect to the browser using a live server extension. The first message that we see is a confirm function. Confirm function just pop up a message with 2 buttons, OK or cancel. And this function returns true if you press OK and returns false if you press cancel. For example, I press OK and then we have a new message. This pop-up message is generated by prompt function. Here the user can type something. And then if the user presses OK, we will have this message in the JavaScript. And if the user presses cancel, we will have null as a result. So after you got the message from the user, for each character in this message, choose a random 0 or 1. For each 0, you will increment cats by 1. And for each 1, you will increment dogs by 1. Dogs and cats are represented by numbers. To generate a random number, you can use this function. And if you want to know more about random in the JavaScript, I have a video on this topic. Try to solve this part by your own, but right now let's solve it together. The first step in our challenge is to take the message from the user. So I can write the same line to ask a message. And we will store it in the variable user message. Then let's try to write a for loop. I start from the keyword for. Then in the parentheses we have 3 parts. So in the first part I initialize the variable. I is the most common name for the variable in the for loop, and by default we assign the initial value of 0 to the I. In the second part we should determine when our loop should run. We want to iterate through every single character that user wrote in the message, so I can write I is less than user message.length. And in the third part we should increase or decrease our I. In our case we can increase it by 1. Then we need to generate a random 0 or 1. I will start from the variable random number. And then I will write the same function to generate a random 0 or 1. Now I need to increment cats if our random number is equal to 0. And otherwise I need to increment our dogs. So let's initialize cats and dogs. And now we will write a simple if statement. If random number equal to 0, in this case we will increment cats by 1. I used a shorthand ++ to increment cats by 1. And otherwise we will increment dogs by 1. Let's also log the message to the console to see how it works. I wrote 2 console logs, and right now we see a pop-up prompt where we can write something. And when I pressed OK, you see that our word was allocated between 2 variables, cats and dogs. And let's try again. If I just press OK, we have number of cats that is equal to 0 and number of dogs that equals to 0. The second part is called bone distribution. In this challenge, you need to order food for animals. And then in the console, you need to show if there are enough food or not. We assume that all cats have food, but then for each cat, we order a new bone for dog. So the amount of bones will be equal to the amount of cats. And then if number of bones are more or equal to number of dogs, you need to log the message that all animals are happy. And otherwise you will log the message that not enough food. Now you can try solving it on your own, but right now I will show you the solution. Let's start from the new variable bones. And then we'll create a new for loop that will order a new bone for each cat. In the first part, I initialize I. Then I will write that I is less than bones. So we don't need to add a word length to the bones, because in this case, bones are represented by numbers. And in the third part, I will increase I by 1. And now I can just write bones plus plus, because for each cycle, I need to add a new bone. And then we will continue beyond this for loop. We will write that if bones are more or equal to dogs, console.log the message that all animals are happy. And in the else statement, we will log the message that not enough food to the console. I also added a new log to the console to see the amount of bones that we have. So let's test it. I will write something like code, so we know that this word contains 4 characters. And then we see that randomly it was distributed between cats and dogs, and we have 1 cat and 3 dogs. So the next message that not enough food is the right message because cats are less than dogs, but then we have the amount of bones that equal to 0, and this is not the right answer because it should be equal to 1. And the problem is that in the for loop we wrote I is less than bones, but bones is equal to 0, so right here should be variable cats. Now if I save the file and write the code again, we see the same situation, but the number of bones is equal to 1, which is the right answer. We can test it again to see that the amount of bones are equal to the amount of cats. I will write a long message. Now you see that we have 8 cats and 8 bones, so all works correctly. The third part is called Hungry Dog Alert, and this is the final and the trickiest part because it depends on the result of the part 2. If in the part 2 you log that all animals are happy, you don't need to add any additional messages. But otherwise, if some dogs are hungry, for each hungry dog you need to add the word more to the message. And after all these cycles, you need to add the word food to the message. So for example, if you have 2 hungry dogs, you will have the message more food. And in this case, I wrote that you will have a variable hungry dogs, but you should think how to calculate it. As always, try it yourself first and then let's solve it together. As I said, it depends on the second part. One of the possible solutions is actually to start writing it inside of the second part. So you have an else statement with a message that not enough food, and inside of this message you can start to solve this challenge. So you can write for loop and initialize hungry dogs and so on. But in this case, I want to show you one trick that you might use if you want to separate these parts. Let's add a new variable enough food with a default value of true. And then in the else part, where we log the message that not enough food, we can set the value for the enough food variable that will be equal to false. And then I will start the third part from the if statement that if enough food equals to false. And here we'll write all the logic for the third part. Also, we have a shorthand for enough food equal to false, which is not logical operator in front of the enough food variable. This if statement is absolutely the same as the previous one, but this is just a shorthand. And now let's start to solve our code challenge. For the for loop, we will need the variable hungry dogs. So how to calculate hungry dogs? So let's assume that I have 10 dogs and 8 bones. To calculate how many dogs are hungry, we need to subtract from the amount of dogs the amount of bones. So let's declare this variable. And we definitely know that hungry dogs are more than 0 because we calculated it in the part 2. So now I can start a new for loop where I will initialize I. Then we need to add the word more for each hungry dog. So I will write I is less than hungry dog. Hungry dogs variable is a number, so I don't need to add .length at the end of this variable. And then I need to increase I by 1. Let's also declare the variable message. And then we'll just add the word more to the message. I also used a shorthand for that, and this shorthand means message equal message plus more. If this shorthand isn't new for you, I have a video on this topic. Then we also need to add the word food after all these words more. After our for loop, I will add a new line, message plus equal food. And then we also need to log this message to the console. So let's test how it works. I will write the word code again. And now you see that we have 1 cat and 3 dogs. So we have a message that not enough food, and then we have a message more food because we have only 1 bone, and it means that we have 2 hungry dogs. Let's also try what will be if we press OK. So we see that the amount of cats are 0 and the amount of dogs are 0. All animals are happy because 0 animals need 0 food. Our code examples are becoming more and more complex. Now it's important to learn how to find and fix bugs. In the next video, we will explore debug tools that you can use for error detection.